Another day, another Bruins game in the books.
Right here on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
But the conversation continues. Welcome to Bruin Talk, your post-game chance to react to the Bruins.
This is a special program.
And now, your host for Bruin Talk.
Time to talk about it with Brian Fenley.
'Cause everything I touch turns gold.
Your host, Brian Fenley.
No more offensive malpractice for this Bruins team. They end a 5-game losing streak and they stride past Rutgers 35-32, squashing the Scarlet Knights' homecoming on a banner day for Bruins quarterback Ethan Garbers. Welcome in to Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. This is a caller-friendly show, and we will be with you for the next hour here on AM 570 LA Sports. 866-987-2570, 866-987-2570. You can also follow me on X at Brian Fenley. And if you have something witty, something intelligent, you can correspond with me during the show. And if it's something interesting, I might as well read it on the air. And better yet, I'll give you credit for you writing that comment on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. But coming into this game, as we start things off here, you know that offense for UCLA. The odd offense coming into today was the flaky friend you had that you just couldn't really depend on. Are you going to get what you want out of that friend? Are you not? Are they going to show up? Are they not? The offense before today, it seemed at times for UCLA, it was like, have you ever tried to do a book report presentation without reading the book, where you just really aren't sure what to do in certain segments and what to say? Instead, this team today offensively, it looked a little bit more like, say, I don't know, Tom Hanks teaching a class on acting. The guys on offense knew their stuff. Ethan Garbers, a banner day for him. But before we get to him, I don't know if you guys are on Instagram, but there was an Instagram Live in the Bruin locker room, a very happy UCLA locker room. J. Mike Sturdivant, the Bruin wide receiver. They were all celebrating in the locker room after this one, and this is what they were playing. Waka Flocka Flame Grove Saint Party. I love it. This is what they were rocking in the locker room. UCLA Instagram Live after leaving New Jersey with the win. And while that song talks about It's a Party, the man that sort of was the man of the party, if you want to take it that way, would be Ethan Garbers. Career highs across the board. Had a career high 383 yards passing, career high 4 touchdown passes, had 5 total in the game, and overall for the offense, 478 yards. Best number we've seen all season by a lot for UCLA. They had 21 points at the half. Remember, the season high for this team in points before today was 17, and they finished with 35, so that's more than double their previous season high of 17, which they had in a loss at home last week against Minnesota, and also a defeat on the road at LSU. It's the first half where UCLA, on the very first drive, they got that offense going. A touchdown right out of the gates. 11 plays, 75 yards, eating up about 6 minutes of clock. And it's Ethan Garbers finding Logan Loya for the 5-yard touchdown. Now, here's the thing, though. It isn't an anomaly to say that UCLA came out of the gates of one of these latest games to score a touchdown right away. But to say that there have been other missed opportunities offensively after scoring, let's say, a first drive touchdown in the first half, yeah, that has been a reoccurring theme, a plaguing problem for this team. It's like, yeah, you score right away, but then the offense later on in the first half, they run into it. And a lot of you listening have felt this. It's like having writer's block. Missed opportunities. They don't know what to do. But the difference was this. UCLA had 4 drives in the first half. 3 of them were touchdowns, and 1 was a punt. The turning point in this game, I'm pointing out to one play, and it was UCLA going for it at their own, let's say, 18-yard line, and it was 4th and 1. This is the same sort of play that they had looming last week against Minnesota when the Bruins are up in the fourth quarter and it's 4th and 1 at their 12-yard line, and they decide to punt. Minnesota then comes back on the ensuing drive right before the end of the game, scores the touchdown, and wins the game. You want to talk about this, the game management of Deshaun Foster. Just as much as these players are growing, Deshaun Foster is growing as to what he needs to do and what he thinks he needs to do to win games and managing things when they're playing out on the field. He goes for it. I love the aggressive attitude towards it. And what does that lead to? Yes, they convert on the 4th down. And later on in the drive, it's another. We're speaking about career highs for Ethan Garbers. How about a career high 49-yard touchdown run for Ethan Garbers? He had the 49-yard touchdown run. He also, later in the second quarter, had a 22-yard touchdown pass to T.J. Harden. That was with 22 seconds left in the second quarter. Another problematic issue for the Bruins lately had been closing out the first half and putting points on the board and not managing the clock well. Well, this seems to be something of a nuance, something that could be a sign of things to come, if you will, because UCLA closes out that first half, putting up more points on the board. But with all of that said, and UCLA goes in to halftime leading 21-10. It's the third quarter, and it's the upheaval. That's another thing that has been really hurting this team. Could it be finally a scoring springboard and not a quarter of a very, let's just say, humbling nature for the Bruins? Because the Bruins in the last couple of third quarters, before this game today, and you are listening to Postgame Bruin Talk, I'm Brian Fenley here on AM 570 LA Sports. The Bruins have struggled mightily in third quarters in putting up points and doing anything offensively. In fact, these are bad habits that are hard to break. These are vices that are not easy to let go of. And lots of you out there can attest to whatever that is in your life that you're trying to get rid of, and it's not easy to do. But the Bruins, and it seemed as if it was going to be, here we go again. Struggles in the third quarter. Today against Rutgers were going to reappear. Because what do the Bruins do? Their first drive of the third quarter, they go 3 and out. And they get gashed early in the third quarter on the ground. Kyle Monangai had 3 touchdown runs for the Scarlet Knights. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is what we've seen the last couple of games, and it's driving me insane. Why can't the Bruins figure it out on third down? But what they did is it didn't happen again. Because, yes, there was the 3 and out, but later in the quarter, a 67-yard touchdown pass to Keegan Jones. And that would be, my friends, UCLA's second touchdown in the third quarter all season. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the 7th game of the year. In fact, UCLA, in their first 4 prior Big Ten games before today against Rutgers, had a total of 6 points scored in all of those 3 quarters. And it took one lowly, lonely sole touchdown to finally eclipse that total that was amassed over 4 games when UCLA scores and gets into the end zone in the third quarter. So the Bruins are scoring in the third quarter. That's a sign of new things. And it's not so much of here we go again at this point. It's here we don't go again. And that spells good news for Bruin faithful because the same old stuff isn't happening. Now let's get to that fourth quarter. Jalen Berger scores the touchdown. That is great. But I go back to something that is new territory for UCLA. This idea of them closing out games better. They didn't close out the game. They had a lead late against Minnesota last week, and UCLA made it very interesting. They ended up winning, and it was as if it was a source of relief because the Rutgers Scarlet Knights got it to within 3. The Bruins should have led and won by a lot more, but the way you came out of this game for UCLA, it's kind of the relief you get when you down a bottle of Robitussin and you start to feel a little bit better. It wasn't as if it felt as if you should have won by a lot more. And where I'm going with that is this. There was still this push and pull where the defense and the offense, it's like this law of gravity thing where if one goes up in this game, the offense was going up, but the defense uncharacteristically brought this team down. And you left yourself leaving this game thinking, I just downed a bottle of Pepto-Bismol because we won, but it should not have been that stomach churning in the end. One thing that we need to sort of distance ourselves from is that there were a lot of narratives around the UCLA football team that, let's just say, rest in peace now. What quarterback competition are we talking about? Look, I might have been one of the few that thought, okay, the struggles of Ethan Garbers earlier in the season, let's try Justin Martin. Let's see what he can do. The problem is that I was misinterpreting the situation. It wasn't as if Ethan Garbers all of a sudden had a talent or a level drop. It's that I'm looking through his play through the lens of the offensive line that has been anything short of complimentary as far as deserving praise. Now, this might have been the best showcasing of an offensive line for UCLA in a game this year. And what did it do? It led to Ethan Garbers having these career numbers and a UCLA win. No longer is there any sort of chatter about there needing to be a change at quarterback. So you can put that narrative away. You know what you can also put the narrative away of? That would be, let me ask you this, and we're going to take the phone calls here soon, 866-987-2570 here on Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. How does this Bruin win, 35-32 against Rutgers, how does it change your feelings about Bruins offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy? How does it feel in terms of internally within you about what you are thinking when it comes to Deshaun Foster? Have they changed your opinion of them considering what the offense did in this particular game? Want to discuss that later on in the program. And when we come back here on Postgame Bruin Talk, is this a win that's more of like, let's just say, an anomaly? Is it an aberration? Or is this a foreshadowing for future success? Is this an aberration or analogous to what is to come? Is this a temporary pain reliever, say like downing Advil, you get the win, and then the trouble starts to fester up again and the Bruins struggle? Or is this a launch pad to get on a run and, dare I say it, get into a bowl game? Much more to come here on Postgame Bruin Talk. Also taking your phone calls, 866-987-2570. I'm Brian Fenley. The Bruins coming up with the win, their first Big Ten win, and it's 35-32 against Rutgers. This is the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
Your chance to sound off on the UCLA Bruins. Back to Bruin Talk on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
You are listening to Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. We are taking your phone calls following UCLA's win today. They break a 5-game losing streak, going into New Jersey and ousting Rutgers 35-32 behind an exemplary-like performance from Ethan Garbers. And now the UCLA quarterback, and UCLA's football official Twitter just put this out in regards to just how monumental, how historic this game was for Ethan Garbers. I'm going to run off a few things here just to give you an idea. So for Ethan Garbers, this was the best completion percentage by a Bruin quarterback since 2018. So that's 6 years in the making. Career bests in passing yards and touchdowns. He had 4 through the air. Had a 5th, which was on the ground, which was a career long for him, 49. His career high in a passing touchdown as far as yardage was 67, which he found at Keegan Jones. By the way, Keegan Jones had over 100 yards receiving in this game, helped in large part to that 67-yard touchdown grab. Also, Ethan Garbers, the second quarterback in UCLA history to complete 30 or more passes and have an 80 or better completion percentage. We're talking about legendary work here from a guy who, let's say a game ago, people were calling for a quarterback change. And look, I'm not going to run away from saying I was one of those who thought that would probably be a decent idea. But what I found myself stuck on was that my interpretation of Ethan Garber's play was my judgment was clouded a bit because of how poor the offensive line has been. You give an offensive line something to work with, you start to see better play out of them, and you're going to get more of what Ethan Garber has shown in spurts. If it wasn't this season, it was a season ago where you could even go back to last year and say Ethan Garber's should have been the quarterback from the start. Even you go back to last year, and there were times where Dante Moore, the five-star quarterback who has gone on to be a transfer and head over to Oregon, and he struggled mightily. Does a five-star quarterback like that struggle as badly and look as embarrassed on the field as he does if UCLA's offensive line isn't where it needs to be? It's 2 straight years where UCLA's offensive line has been subpar, but they did play, I would have to think, their best game of the season. They tried to get some sort of balance involved with a running game. If it weren't for some of those QB kneels at the very end from Ethan Garber's, the Bruins for the very first time this season would have had 100 yards at least on the ground. And how does this impact what you think about, let's just say, the offensive coordinator and Eric Bieniemy? He has taken a whole lot of criticism from a whole lot of people saying this was not the right move to bring him in as OC. And look, I've taken a lot of your phone calls, and we're going to take them here shortly. 866-987-2570. And a lot of people haven't shown a whole lot of confidence or promise in Deshaun Foster. How does a win like this change this? In terms of your opinions of those two guys, I'll say this. You can criticize the lack thereof of a running game for UCLA, but this is Exhibit A in the win against Rutgers, that UCLA doesn't need to have this dominant running game to win games. And I would even go as far as to say that when the offense is humming like this, I don't think this team is that far away from being a great Big Ten team. Now, before you roll your eyes at me and say, what are you talking about here? I understand where the biggest discrepancy is for UCLA, and that would be in the trenches, the physicality that they're lacking on the line, whether that's defensively up front or getting more dudes on the offensive line of substance. I think that needs to be obviously a pressing topic moving forward and a recruiting hot topic for offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy and head coach Deshaun Foster going into next season. But for an offense that came into this game and you just didn't know what you were going to expect out of them, sort of like when you go to a restaurant and you didn't want to read the Yelp review and you just said, let's go for it and see what happens, to being surprised and shocked, to the pass protection for UCLA holding its own. You can say what you want about Eric Bieniemy, and he's a pass-first guy, but this team can win even when the running game isn't at the Chip Kelly-like level. We were so spoiled in seeing what Chip Kelly did as far as getting the run game going, and that obviously was a critical theme for the way that he liked to design his offenses. And I think sometimes we're comparing a running game to Chip Kelly's, even though at the expense of a better passing attack, where, as we've been talking about, Ethan Garber's today in this win had his career high in passing yardage, which would be at over 300 yards, 383 yards passing, career high, 4 touchdown tosses, and another one on the ground from 49 yards as he rushed in there, shades of Dorian Thompson-Robinson with the football in his hands. And let's not forget, on that touchdown run, there were some big blocks down the stretch from UCLA. So they're blocking better. The offense seemed to be humming, and it's not one of those, what was the big talking point when we were talking this week when I was at practice and we were discussing things with Bruin head coach Deshaun Foster. He even said this after the loss last Saturday against Minnesota. He says, we are a one-half team. This is the first time where we have seen an offense that hasn't fallen into the quicksand of having an offensive malaise in the third quarter, where you saw pretty stand-up offense, sturdiness, reliability with the offense just about every single quarter. And that isn't something that we have been used to here. So where I'm going with this is I think we need to hold back a little bit now just to see how well the offense has flourished on whatever criticism and whatever blame that you want to put on Eric Bieniemy's shoulders. Because I was talking to our great producer, Zach Alcalde, before we started here on Postgame Bruin Talk, and this is Brian Fenley. We got some calls. We're going to take them here momentarily, and we are on AM 570 LA Sports. But if you're looking at a blessing in disguise here, and you saw how much the offense struggled, UCLA was getting bossed around in some lopsided losses, some bloodbaths, if you will, losing to the likes of Indiana and Oregon and LSU. And I start to think to myself, and I know Zach was talking about this as well, could going through that gauntlet have allowed UCLA to make this turnaround faster? As in to say in-season turnaround and not wait until next year. I hold Deshaun Foster's word when he tells me with a straight face that we're going to get this turned around as far as his UCLA football program. I know it. The question is when. And the question is going to be going into the bye week now and then the next upcoming game, which will be at Nebraska. Is this just one of those standalone wins and then UCLA regresses again? Or can they build off of this? Is this a launch pad for them? And is this something that they're going to ride and close out really strong? Lots to get to in regards to that chatter later on in the program about how a single win could be a real spark for what appeared to be a season that appeared lost. I mean, I can't tell you how many people on social media were writing off this team and saying they were going to go 1-11. Yeah, are you hitting delete on the tweets yet? Because that's not going to happen. And the way they played, and you look at their schedule, there's not a whole lot of heavyweights left. So what I say is they took a lot of punishment from a lot of ranked teams in successive games. And by going through that in such a short span, could that have allowed UCLA to turn things around as fast as they did mid-season, as opposed to really getting a good idea about where this program stands maybe next year or later than that? Let's kick off our callers here on Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. The always reliable Solomon is in Lake Balboa. Solomon, it's great to hear from you following, believe it or not, a Bruin win.
Hey, man, listen, great to hear from you and great to see you, to experience a win. And that was part of my commentary is I think the team now can say, yeah, we finally got a conference win and get used to it. You know, it's nice. It's nice for the team to experience that. And a couple things about the game, if you don't mind. End of the game, UCLA caught a break with that touchdown because you know what? The way things have been going for UCLA, if Rutgers had recovered and scored and won, I would have gone, yep, kind of, we're used to it. So that was a nice turnaround. They got a little bit of the football gods on their side on that one. Regarding Garbers, I'm just going to go through, people and topics that you've mentioned real quickly.
Yeah.
Garbers, give him a little protection, and it's interesting what he produces, right?
Yeah, the narrative completely, Solomon, the narrative completely changes around Ethan Garbers when you give him time. It's wild. All of the people, and I'm going to throw myself out there, that thought, why don't we try to test the waters with a different quarterback and see what Justin Martin can do off of the game against Penn State? Now I look at myself and I say how wrong I was.
Yeah, because he's a really decent quarterback if you give him at least decent coverage. And getting to the coaching, and then I'll end there. The enemy, listen, he's coming from the pros, so he's probably going through a little bit of a learning curve with kids because they're in school. They've got other stuff on their mind besides football. He's probably learning how to keep that offense as simple as he possibly can and still be effective. And Deshaun Foster, I give him credit. He's learning on the job, and just stay humble. And I think you are correct. Yeah, they went through a hell of a gauntlet there for the beginning of this season, and let's see where we go from now. They might stack up some wins.
That is definitely something that is going to be thought about amongst Bruin fans. Thank you so much, Solomon, for the phone call. And, yeah, it was a win, but it should have been a little bit more expansive a win. UCLA, as we're talking about right now, winning earlier today against Rutgers, ending a 5-game losing streak, 35-32, the final score. I'm not leaving this game thinking to myself, oh, that was a comfortable win. I'm leaving this game winning, and then I'm going to call my acupuncturist and get a session in just because of how I felt so high-strung at the end, where UCLA still – and look, we're at a time now, this is a benefit, right? What do they say? Pressure is a privilege. Trying to close out games is a privilege. UCLA isn't really used to this. So there were 3 consecutive flags that were called. There were some penalties. Some of them, I feel like, down the stretch were careless. But to another point that changed the dynamic of this game was that Ethan Garbers did not throw an interception. He did fumble it once, and the one time he fumbled it, Rutgers, late in the game, comes back and scores, and that was where the Rutgers Scarlet Knights got it to within 3. Then, as Solomon was talking about, the Bruins managed to get the onside kick, and unfortunately for a guy like for UCLA, they actually ran it back for a touchdown, but that was negated because Logan Loya called for a fair catch. He was part of the play, but wasn't the one who took the football. And all of that amounts is a UCLA 35-32 win. The Bruins got a takeaway themselves. Brian Addison getting the interception, his second of the season. But these opponents we play, they profit off of Ethan Garver's mistakes. To say that one didn't happen, the only takeaway for Rutgers was deep in the fourth quarter, and that was the only time that I felt like this game was up for grabs, is improvement. Should Ethan Garbers have fumbled that football? Absolutely not. But you see the difference when you don't win the turnover battle, you're even, but you're not on the losing side, and how that changes the fate of the Bruins. Harold is in North Hollywood. Welcome to the program, Harold. Thanks so much for calling in here on Postgame Bruin Talk.
Hey, Brian, you got to build off of something. I was encouraged. I thought the line play was better. The players believe in Foster, and Foster believes in the players. This thing ain't going to change overnight. And when you brought up Chip Kelly earlier, I cringe how he left the program. So it's going to take time. But I was encouraged. But, we won't know for the next few weeks if this win will propel the Bruins to at least hopefully a 500 season. Like you said, they did have a tough schedule early on. And I just think, I'm just hoping. I'm a guy with the glasses half full. So I'm just hoping that they can take this win and in a couple weeks go to is that game in Nebraska?
That game is in Nebraska. And by the way, I mean, if you look at what Nebraska did today, they got absolutely walloped against an Indiana team that beat UCLA. What was it, 42-13? Nebraska lost today to Indiana 56-7. So that's the Nebraska team that UCLA, after the bye week coming up, is going to play, which, Harold, I think leads Bruin fans to think, well, we could maybe connect one win with another. And considering how the Bruins played and how many miscues on the field Nebraska showcased, that there is a chance that this isn't going to be a one-hit wonder of a win and that a run could ensue.
Hey, Brian, it's a winnable game, but as a Bruin fan for many years, as you know, you never know what you're going to get. You're feeling good one week, and the next week they lay an egg, and then you're back feeling lousy again.
Well, we'll see what happens, Harold. Thanks so much for the phone call. And don't mean to cut you off, but we have a few more callers we want to get to. Harold, call us after the game against Nebraska. Again, UCLA, I would say this is a well-timed bye week because here's the thing, and I don't want to jinx UCLA. They don't have a lot of injuries. And one of the big storylines going into the game today with the Bruins taking on Rutgers is they've been decimated with injuries all over the place. And this was a team that came in that was 4-2. I think Rutgers probably going into this game was the most fraudulent 4-2 team in the country. UCLA came into the game 1-5, and they were the most misunderstood, underrated 1-5 team in the country, and it's the underrated team that beats the overrated team 35-32. Postgame Bruin Talk here. I'm Brian Fenley, recapping and reacting to UCLA's win today on the road, their first Big Ten victory, ending a 5-game losing streak, 35-32. The Bruins get it done against Rutgers, with Ethan Garbers accounting for 5 touchdowns, 4 through the air, 1 on the ground. Eddie is in Rancho Palos Verdes. Eddie, thanks so much for chiming in here on Postgame Bruin Talk. What'd you think about this game?
Yeah, oh no, it was a great win for them today. I kind of was kind of giving up on Foster and the way things were been running these last 4 or 5 weeks or whatever. But you know, I have to hand it to them. They came out with a great win today. And the thing is that they're going to Nebraska now. Wow, they've been traveling the most miles as a college team in the nation, and they're going to be going to Nebraska next week. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the offensive line. I'm glad that Dico Gorio is back today, and to see them really go as an offensive team with their line, and that's the first thing you've got to look for on your offense is their offensive line. And I hope in the future is that they look towards that in their recruiting, especially at St. John's Bosco. And so this is a great win. Garbers had a really good game today, and I was suspect with him. And it just shows you how with the offensive line that they could put up the numbers that they can, and he looked really good, confident. You could see it when he was dropping back and passing, and I'm glad for the running back that I hadn't seen for a while is that the Berger kid, and it's good that they have Harden too. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to bring up, and hope that they keep on winning.
Yeah, let's hope
okay.
So. And they keep on winning, and you keep on calling. That's Eddie. Thanks so much, Eddie, here calling on Postgame Bruin Talk. Jalen Berger getting into the end zone for UCLA. And how about these individual performances as well? You got Keegan Jones, who notably is a running back, but he had 5 catches for 114 yards in the game, had a 67-yard touchdown grab in the contest. Maliki Mataval, the tight end, gosh, he was fun to watch. It looked as if there was Greg Dulcich out there or Caleb Wilson catching balls, the tight end. But Mataval, 6 catches for 104 yards, and the offense was distributed to a lot of different pass catchers. Somebody, surprisingly, who did not get the football, did not catch a pass today, was J. Mike Sturdivant. And to say that UCLA can win like this without J. Mike going off, that says a lot about the complementary offense that UCLA has, the other guys in support with their offensive weaponry. And it's not that the running game has to be all that great. Like, I think that we're going to continue to talk about the running game and the lack thereof and how lackluster and subpar it's been. But when you're passing as well as you are and you've got pass protection, like the offensive line for UCLA showcased for Ethan Garbers, you can get yourself around some of those issues with the running attack. And again, Eric Bieniemy's not a guy that is going to want to run the football a lot. And to Eddie's point, you look ahead to the schedule, you got the bye week coming up, and then at Nebraska, and then 3 of the last 4 home games, the 3 of the last games after the Nebraska contest are at home. UCLA has home games against Iowa, USC, and Fresno State. That one lone last away game is at Washington, and that's going to be on a Friday, November 15th. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. When we come back, we'll take more of your phone calls, 866-97-2570. Deshaun Foster was in the news this week talking about the NIL situation at UCLA. Good news on that front for the Bruins, what it means for a football team that just finished with their first win in Big Ten play and how that will impact the program moving forward. Taking more of your calls as well as we are reacting and reveling in a Bruin win. First win since the season opener in August. Bruins take it against Rutgers 35-32. I'm Brian Fenley. More after this. This is the Bruins Audio Network.
Your chance to react continues. Back to Bruin Talk on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
That it is. Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. 866-987-2570, the number to call in here after UCLA pulls off the road victory 35-32 against a struggling all of a sudden Rutgers team. By the way, Rutgers opened this game as a touchdown favorite in the gambling markets, and it was their homecoming. So to add insult to that, not only did they lose the game, it was their homecoming, and whoever made that line with Rutgers opening up as a touchdown favorite, I'm not exactly sure what was being seen there. Look, I was going to, you're going to laugh at me. Before this game started, I was going to tweet out, UCLA is going to win this game. That's how confident I was. The one thing that held me back from doing that is I saw what happened to Colin Cowherd last week when he professed USC at the half was going to beat Penn State. He went on this diatribe. He put out this video on social media, and then he ends up eating his words. And I just didn't need that type of publicity. I just didn't need that. I want to tell you, and I hope you believe me, UCLA, I knew it from the start. I thought that gambling line was way off, especially when Rutgers head coach Greg Schiano, who after his team got absolutely bulldozed a game ago against Wisconsin, he said after the game, last week's game, that he felt like his team was so disconnected out there that they wouldn't even have been able to chew gum and walk at the same time. So with that said, that didn't lead things to be all too promising for Rutgers, who, as mentioned, don't want to take anything away from UCLA's win, but this Scarlet Knights team that started out 4 in a row, decimated with injuries, and they are a shell of themselves, a team that did beat Washington earlier in the year along with Virginia Tech. But I want to hit on something that is very important, and it's only telling that this is going to be an even more talking point, a bigger talking point moving forward for UCLA. But look, I take a lot of calls here, and I hear from a lot of fans that are bemoaning over the decision for UCLA football to go with Deshaun Foster as the head coach. And look, it's easy to criticize. It's easy to do. The Bruins, they finally had something to celebrate. They win today. First win since the season opener. Their first Big Ten win. They'd lost the last 5 games. Offense was in disarray. They finally get the offense going today. But I just want to put things into perspective a little bit around this UCLA football program. So this week, you might have seen the news. Deshaun Foster talked about, in addition to the NIL game for UCLA, so they have essentially centralized things into 3 different branches, NIL-wise. And now, as of this week, it's been announced publicly, there is a football-only NIL section. So now you can have donors and anybody who wants give money directly to the football team, and that's it. Beforehand, you're putting your money towards the athletes, but you don't exactly know where it's going. This is significant because I asked Deshaun Foster this week about what does this do for your team, and he said, and he also said this in another interview Wednesday after practice, that they've got 7 figures. They got $1 million in that NIL bank right now. Why I bring that up is if you want to lure transfers, you want to bring in some high-priced talent out of high school, show me the money. And so when you look at where the program is right now, before you criticize Deshaun Foster, UCLA has been, and look, I love this institution, but they have been reactive instead of proactive with the NIL. And actually, you've seen this sort of happen across the board for a lot of high academic institutions. Look at Stanford. Now, Vanderbilt got a key win recently against Alabama, but some of the higher institutions academically that have known to have proud football programs, UCLA, Stanford, they have been slow to get to the NIL. And so when you're slow to get to the NIL, the playing field isn't even. So you're not working with the talent that you could be if you're playing along with the NIL game. So when you criticize a coach, like in this situation, Deshaun Foster, you have to also keep in mind that finally UCLA is starting to get it football-wise with the NIL. And with that said, now they're going to bring in better players, and it's going to make a much bigger difference, I think, moving forward. We're not seeing that play out right now because this is so new, but a lot of the higher academic institutions have really been slow to buy in to the NIL. Now, there are a lot of schools that are in the Big Ten that aren't as academically sound. You know, schools that maybe you would consider, like if you're applying to schools, it might be a safety school, like Oregon. And Oregon is absolutely in bed with the NIL. And you've got to be able to get on board with that. Like in Oregon, UCLA doesn't have the Nike money that Oregon has, but this is an encouraging sign for a team that needs to step it up in the NIL game. And the football-only fund is called Bruins for Life. And this is pretty new here in regards to UCLA and what they're doing. So keep that in mind. Also, Deshaun Foster talking to the media after this game. Today's win against Rutgers, 35-32. And Foster, he said, quote, "It's more about the guys. So I'm excited to get a Big Ten win, but we've got a few more games and would be like to get ourselves into a bowl game. So we're going to continue to play, and hopefully we can get there," close quote. Already throwing out a bowl game as a possibility. I'm not saying that's all too far-fetched considering what's left on the schedule. And you look at what UCLA has left. They've got the bye week coming off the win. Then they're at Nebraska, home against Iowa, at Washington, and then they finish up with 2 home games. Those would be USC and Fresno State. The only team that I'm looking at, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's going to be tough to win against, if anything, is probably USC. But USC right now, we're watching the game here, they're tied at 7 on the road against Maryland, and USC has all sorts of issues with their program right now in the state that it is at 3-3. And so I look at a lot of winnable games for the Bruins. And for a lot of people, they were quick to ride the bandwagon of this Bruin team is not going to win another game. But I saw what Deshaun Foster was doing. And I've been at practice. I go to practice every week. And it's so easy for the keyboard warriors, the bloggers, those who aren't actually at practice, to sit back and say this Bruin team is not going to win another game after they had lost 5 in a row. It's easy to do that because your information that you have at your fingertips is only what you can see digitally. You're not on site. You don't see this football team. You don't see the fact that these guys are practicing as hard as if they were in the hunt right now for a Big Ten championship. This does not look like a team. Like, I'm telling you, and I'm not just saying this because my mom went to UCLA. I love UCLA. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. But I see how hard these guys are practicing with this losing streak that finally got upended. They're not practicing like a team that came into today 1-5. They are not. So I never felt like this team didn't have another win in them. What I'm curious to see is if this is contagious. If UCLA can make this not just an aberration, not just an anomaly of a win, but they can do as Deshaun Foster said, throwing out the potential of a bowl. And we know all the long-term ramifications of getting to a bowl. It's not just the fact that you're going to get some money from it and all of that, but you've got weeks upon weeks more of practice, which is exactly what this new offensive system needs under Eric Bieniemy. As many practices as possible. To get those extra practices is critical, which you would get if you make the bowl. UCLA currently is 2-5, right? So they've got to win of the remaining 5 games. They've got to win 4 at the very minimum. USC, that presents a challenge. You could also say Iowa at home, but there are some winnable games out there for UCLA, and it's amazing how a single win, one win, can totally change the narrative around a few things. The quarterback competition. People were calling for, and no disrespect at all, have the utmost respect for Ethan Garbers, were calling for him to sit this thing out and give Justin Martin a chance. And I'm pointing the finger at me. I'm not one of those guys or gals who does a show and is not going to admit when they're wrong. I'm not going to just play I told you so radio. Now, I will tell you when I did something right, but I'm also going to admit when I'm wrong. I was on the train that thought Justin Martin might have been a good decision just because of the way UCLA and their offense was going, just to change, try a different quarterback. That narrative has subdued. I haven't seen a lot of people complaining about Eric Bieniemy today. I live on social media to my own detriment. My wife hates it. She says, "What are you doing on your phone? Pay attention to me." And I probably should. But the fact is that I get to listen and I get to read all the tweets. I get to see what people are saying. And it's so funny because we've had 3 callers today. Last week, we had probably 10 callers. And we've set records for callers. The tweets, people like to write negative tweets. People like to call in when there's something negative going on. God forbid something positive happens with UCLA and they win today 35-32 against Rutgers. And this is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley on AM 570 LA Sports. And people are less attuned to want to call in. They're less willing to put out a tweet storm because good things happen. People, I get it, they want to complain. But there's a lot of people who complained about this team that are now mum. They don't know what to say. They're left speechless. And those are the people, a lot of them, that haven't seen this team working at practice every week with their own eyes. This is a group of people who don't know exactly what they're talking about. And that makes a big difference. And I saw this betting line. UCLA, they were, for Rutgers, they were up a touchdown in the betting line going into this game. I said, have you guys watched what UCLA is doing? Now, sure, the problems persist. And where are they? Because we can talk about them. Wins have a way of being a Band-Aid for some of the issues that are still popping up. Late game management for UCLA, yes. The Bruins inviting Rutgers back in the game. There was the fumble from Ethan Garbers late in the fourth quarter, and UCLA should have won this game by double digits, and it was a 3-point game, to where I'm leaving the game, and I'm watching it, and instead of feeling relaxed and overjoyed, I feel like I got to go to the medicine cabinet and get something for my nausea, because I feel like this one sort of brought out all the knots in the stomach churning nature that it brought, the feelings that it sort of presented upon somebody because of how close this was at the end. And I guess I downed the Pepto-Bismol bottle because that's kind of what you felt like you had to do coming off of this game. But for the Bruins moving forward, they're 2-5 on the year, and where they need to add on to some of their focuses at practice this week. There's a bye week coming up. So it's the late game management issues, more undisciplined play. There were 3 straight flags that popped up late in the game. That was an issue. A total of, I think, 50 yards of yardage as far as penalty yardage or more. That's not going to cut it. There were those 3 penalties late. That totally changed the complexion. That allowed Rutgers in the end to go on to score a touchdown. If Rutgers recovers the onside kick, they get the football with no timeouts, with under 2 minutes to go. And we could be talking to ourselves and saying, another Bruin heartbreak. This is a game that should not have been as close. And it is a privilege to leave a game and win it like UCLA did and say we should have won by more when you win. Could you have said that against LSU? Not the way the Bruins played in the second half. Could you have said that against Indiana? Oregon? Not so much. Third quarter wasn't the bugaboo for UCLA like it has been. Usually it's been desolate of offense, dormant. And here in this third quarter against Rutgers, the Bruins scored their first third quarter touchdown of the season. This is game 7. Imagine if they could do more of that as this season goes on. But with the 35 points scored by UCLA, that is more than half the number they had previously as their scoring high in a game this year. They had 17. You add 35 to the mix. And this wasn't the best game from UCLA's best defensive player, arguably, in Carson Schlesinger. As the guys were talking about on the broadcast, he struggled early on, didn't really get a whole lot of tackles. And the Bruins, they score right out of the gates, and then they give up a score right out of the gates. So it's like, again, as a Bruin football fan, I can't help but think to myself, I guess we can't have too much of a good thing. We can't dare have the offense playing really well and the defense in the same game. And for the first time, I would say this year, the defense wasn't piggybacking the Bruins' fate. It was the offense carrying the metaphoric baton. This is a new normal I would hope for moving forward. The run defense, it got exposed some. And Kyle Monungai, the running back for Rutgers, had over 100 yards on the ground in this game. He had 3 touchdowns. The Bruins came into this game, and you're listening to Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley here on AM 570 LA Sports. The Bruins came into this game ranked 13th in the nation in run defense. So they faltered in that department. And they're losing this game if Ethan Garbers doesn't have the offensive explosion of a game that he has. And when we have seen game after game where the defense is sort of walking with ankle weights, just trying to carry this team to the finish line with a win, it's the offense that says, here we are, and hopefully this is a sign of things to come. The offense shines on a day where Ethan Garbers had a career-high 4 touchdown tosses, over 380 yards passing, and here is really the story in the game. 1 turnover from Ethan Garbers. He has been, and he would be the first to tell you this, he has been a turnstile for turnovers, a turnover machine. And if there was one thing that was going to get him off the field and get Justin Martin in as the backup quarterback and replacing the quarterback and seeing what Justin Martin had to do or was capable of doing, it would be if the turnover issues persisted and festered in this road game against Rutgers. But they didn't. And that's why they kept Ethan Garbers on the field, and he got 2 guys over 100 yards receiving. Maliki Monteval over 100 yards receiving. Keegan Jones had over 100 yards receiving. And it was Logan Loy who had the very first touchdown in this game. He's got 3 touchdown catches on the season. That leads the team. TJ Harden got a score as well through the air from 22 yards out. If I'm going to say that there is one side of the ball, yes, we talk about the defense. The run defense wasn't at its best. And at times, the back end gave up some crossing routes and some big chunk plays for the Rutgers passing attack. But question marks for a special teams where we're attempting a 54-yard field goal from Mateen Bagani. I don't know why that needed to happen because of where we were, and obviously you give Rutgers some good field position if you miss that field goal. So I think on a day where usually special teams is probably the strongest element of UCLA's game, and then you go defense is right there, and then offense is towards the bottom. Now it's the offense. The way the offense played and the way it surprised you, it's like when you get status on an airplane and the way they spoil you. That's what the offense did. You were in for the ride. You didn't know what to expect. It was as if this offense was like you going to a restaurant without getting a Yelp review. But you sit in there and you go in for the full flight of watching this game, and you're spoiled like somebody with status on an airline. The Bruins march on, winning this game against Rutgers today 35-32. A historic performance from Ethan Garbers, and UCLA ends a 5-game losing streak with a well-timed bye week coming up. So we won't talk to you until after the bye week at Nebraska on Saturday. They haven't announced on November 2nd that game time, but when they do, we will be with you afterwards. Post-game Bruin Talk. I'm Brian Fenley. Thanks so much for your phone calls, and thanks so much for listening here on AM 570 LA Sports. You can follow me on X at Brian Fenley.